So Terrance Howard says 1 times 1 equals 2. And I watched the entire 3-hour interview with him and Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan didn't do a lot of talking. Terrance Howard did the majority of the talking, and I couldn't be more pleased. There was much that was uncovered in that discussion. And for any of us that ever had a sense that what we were taught in school and in Western science was off base, then you found a comfortable dialogue in what Terrance Howard was expressing. So when I look at what he has disclosed and what he has shared, I see a echo of the many criticisms and the points of view that say that the foundation for Western science, mathematics, and critical thought needs a little work in order to get to the next level, to innovate, to produce things that are more conducive to the evolution of humankind and the forward progress of industry. So I am one of those that was brought up in a physics education, in a Western science education. And I have to say that if you're like me, there were many times where in the back of your mind, you were probably wondering to yourself, there's no way this actually works the way they're claiming, the way that they're saying. What I mean by that is, let's say that you went through several years. Okay, so most of us that are brought up in the Western world, the United States and Europe, we go through approximately 20 to 30 years of education. 20 to 30 years of education. So if you start getting educated at Head Start, right? Let's say 3 to 4 years old. And then that continues after that. So from 5 years old to 18 years old, right? And then you do undergraduate education, right? And then you maybe do a master's, or then after that you do a PhD. That's a large chunk of your life that you are given information where you are not equipped with the tools from the day you were born to question that information you are being given. Imagine going to school from the time you're almost born to the time you're in your mid-20s, and you have no way whatsoever to actually validate and verify what you're being taught and told. You have no way at all. You simply got to do what you're told in order to get into the system and to progress within the system. Now, the thing that is so convincing about the system the way it is that there is so much that we see that works. Tools like the phone that's recording this image, things like space shuttles, computers, electric cars, you name it, microwaves, even electric ovens. There's so much in this world that we exist in. Even the technology that made this cup, the automated tooling and machinery in a factory that produced, a couple of million of these. So everything in your life right now convinces you that what's in the textbook is right. And I'm not here to say that what's in the textbook is wrong. I'm simply saying that the vast majority of people have no access to or no exposure to a second opinion. And a second opinion that is as deeply worked out as the system that you're exposed to by default. So that's what Terrance Howard represents. He represents a second opinion. So when I saw his presentation at Oxford University, I believe I watched that presentation last year. It was just something to look at. It said Terrance Howard at Oxford. I was like, that's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't have put Terrance Howard with Oxford. The first thought that came to my mind was, you know, those folks at Oxford, they're trying to get some cash from Terrance Howard on this thing. That's what I actually thought when I first saw that. So I was like, they're trying to get some money out of Terrance on this. But when I actually watched it, I was like, wow. I wasn't wowed by the 1 times 1 thing because I wasn't convinced. I was wowed by how eloquent and how thoughtful Terrance was in what he was presenting. So you don't have to agree with someone to actually appreciate the amount of effort that they've put into something that on its own merits has quality, has value, is rich and interesting in its own right, okay? You don't have to agree with them, you know, but at the same time, you can appreciate what they are putting out there, you know, for others to consider. So what I liked about the Oxford address was how it challenged the baseline norms that the students were being exposed to. It was challenging that so that the students can think. Just think. And not only think, but explore it more deeply. Because, hey, 1 times 1 equals 1 might actually turn out to be the truth, the whole truth, and the absolute truth. But are you willing to find out is the question. Or do you just want to take the word for it and just move on? Sometimes that's useful. Sometimes that helps you in your progress of trying to, you know, get to the next level where you have a foundation that you can rely on and you can work from. But there are other things that you might be trying to do where that foundation no longer works. Like, you got 2 different systems. One system, in this one system, 1 times 1 is equal to 1. And in that system, that's true. And so from that basis, then everything else must work in alignment with that. And that system is totally valid to create technologies, to make discoveries, and do all this kind of stuff. You got this other system, 1 times 1 is equal to 2. And in that system, it has its own rules, just like this system does. And if that system is totally worked out and self-consistent, then you can create technologies and make observations. And the 2 systems are not in conflict. It's just that this system can serve its purpose for a while, and then this system can serve a different purpose. And in the case of Terrance Howard, I'm not just rattling off here because I admire him, which I do. I'm only saying anything, even to the extent where it affects my own credibility, because Terrance Howard has 97 patents with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, the United States Patent and Trademark Office. The U.S. federal government has assigned 97 scientific patents to Terrance Howard. See, just because you're an actor on TV and movies and streaming channels, doesn't mean that that's the only thing you know how to do. Just because you know how to play basketball and you're really good at it doesn't mean you're not also good at astrophysics. It doesn't mean that. What you're known for is the only thing you're good for. It doesn't have to be that way. And in Terrance Howard's case, he's good at acting, he's good at politics, he's good at law, and he's good at science. So, what convinced me of his point of views are the 97 patents. That's where I come down on it. Because, and let's use some critical thinking here. Not what to think, but how to think, right? So let's start with the premise. The premise is that in order for an idea to have real validity, practical validity, the premise is there should be sufficient evidence for that idea. Okay, that is a premise. It's not the only premise you can use as a foundation for the concept that you are describing as valid. Okay, so from that premise, we look for indicators and representations that indicate the tangibility of an idea, the tangibility of an assertion. In this case, Terrance Howard's assertion that the foundations for science is off by just a small enough amount that it has eroded the downstream value of science at a certain point in time, which is this point in time that we're in. So that if there is another point of view that can correct the foundational flaws without throwing away the entire rubric of science, then you can steer science back on a course that is more monumentally useful. And I know that use of the word monumental can be a indicator in itself that we're not talking about a strict critical analysis, but that's fine. But going back to the premise, we see the evidence from Terrance Howard in the application of his ideas and the production of tangible results. So then we can draw the correlation or the conclusion that there is validity to his ideas without saying that his ideas are law. We can at least say that although they're not a scientific law, they are at least a stronger hypothesis than than competing hypotheses that emerge from what we might call the mainstream science. So that was my critical analysis, and that is what brought me to side with Terrance Howard on this entire discussion, coupled with my own non-critical prerogatives, which were born out of a remembrance of what I knew from my earlier years. So I was trained in physics, and I was trained in the sciences. I've had exposure to them, right? And then I delved into quantum mechanics and quantum physics. When I was younger, I could understand that stuff. But as I grew older and evolved and changed careers and all of this, I grew out of that. So I couldn't explain it to you now the way I could explain it to you in my 20s and 30s. But what I remember is that as I went down the rabbit hole of theoretical physics and quantum physics and I would read. I was a voracious reader of Scientific American as well, right? So I'm reading books on physics and physics theories and experiments, and I'm reading articles on that. So books and articles, and then I'm also reading scientific magazines. The Scientific American is not representative of the field of science. A lot of what you see in Scientific American magazine then and now, right? Actually, I don't know if Scientific American even exists anymore. But anyway, it was always scientific popularism, right? It was popularizing science. And that's the same thing that Neil deGrasse Tyson used to do on PBS, Public Broadcasting Channel, right? Neil deGrasse Tyson, and who was that other guy? I can't remember his name. The science guy. Oh, David the science guy. Anyway, they are popularizing science, making it more accessible to the general public. And there's always a danger with that because you can lose accuracy if you're not careful. And, you know, part of the mission of popularizing science is to draw in more people into the field of science. Okay? But the thing is that when I'm reading these theories, and I'm reading these articles, and I'm building this knowledge base of more advanced scientific knowledge, Western scientific knowledge. Deep down, I'm like, there is no way this works like this, right? But the problem is that, again, like I said in the beginning, who's going to tell me otherwise? Who's going to help me? Who's going to help me? The only people I can ask any validation of what I'm reading to verify it or to analyze it are the very people who put that information out or who come from the system that puts that information out. So it's like, yeah, you're kind of stuck at that point. So then the danger zone for an individual is where you start out in life with talent. You got like this natural talent for creating things, because that's fundamentally how I entered this world. If you look at Joe Rogan's podcast with Terrance Howard, it starts out, people say, Terrance Howard, he says he entered this world knowing about the world before he was in this world. Something like that. Anyway, I feel the same way about myself. I entered this world as a master of creation. I entered this world as a master of creation. And that is, I have, and I still retain that mastery. It's just that I have to try to balance how my brain side intellect, right? Because you got your intuition, what you feel in your heart, because they've discovered you got neurons in your actual heart. So it's a real thing. It's a real brain here. You got to balance that with brain intellect. Okay? So brain intellect can be influenced by what it's pulling in from this world, but your intuition doesn't get influenced like that. Intuition comes from somewhere else. It comes from here and it comes from somewhere else. So you have a society and a social development that is based off of survival. Dr. B. Sirius described this so well in his reaction to Terrance Howard statements. You have a society that's based on survival. It's a society that is based on how do I keep from being out in the cold, starving, hungry, shot, killed, attacked by predators out in nature. It's a society built on survival and not on collective community, richness of artistry, intellect, and the building of the total being. It's not a society like that. So if you make enough money in this society, you get rich, or even not rich, but you just well off enough with a paycheck to paycheck job that gives you enough of a buffer where you don't have to think about all of those survival things for a while, because the broader society has mechanized the survival part, right? Then you can think about those things. You can look on social media and watch videos about yoga and meditation, or you can go to church and pray and do whatever to try to build the total being. You can try to get organic food and have a better diet and all of this kind of stuff, if you have enough money in this society. But in the background, it's like, oh, but be careful. Make sure you still keep that job, and make sure you still keep that money flowing. Keep an eye on that. Hey, even if you're rich, watch those stockbrokers or those investment bankers and those brokerage accounts. Keep an eye on that, right? Keep an eye on those stocks, so that you can keep working on the total being and the total mastery and that sort of thing. It's not a society for that. It's a society built on survival. And so if anybody's ever seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the pyramid, right? That pyramid, right? This is not a self-actualization society. You're not there, okay? And so that's why Terrance Howard's presentation is so attractive to so many people, because it's tapped into that. It's tapped into the fact that the self-actualization is missing from this whole deal that we've been born into, right? This agreement that we have with the society. The actualization is not on the table. What's on the table is tilling the farm and the field of survival, which is the big part of the pyramid at the bottom. So you stay at the bottom. Even when you make enough money, you're still closer to the bottom than the top in terms of being an actualized being. So you can go to yoga classes and you can eat the organic foods. You can do all this great stuff, right? And it ends up being empty, hollow, and shallow, and it ends up being some form of virtue signaling on steroids, because you can't sustain it, right? When times get tough, when the rubber meets the road and your back is against the wall and you're about to get laid off or fired, or you're about to get evicted from your house or your apartment or whatever, what are you going to do when you're in that situation? Hey, throw the yoga classes away, throw the organic food away, throw the, whatever, and you better buckle down and you better make sure. So it's like, yeah, you got all this technology, you got all this stuff, right? At least you may not personally have all this stuff, but the society looks like it has all this stuff. That's what marketing tells you and explains to you. But it's like, where's the real transformation of human beings? It isn't there. It is not there. You need to look somewhere else, either another lifetime or another society, move to another country, or go to Aspen, Colorado, or somewhere. Go to some corner of the world or this continent, right? Go to Costa Rica or Chile, or go to some part of Africa or some part of India or some part of the Philippines, wherever. But what you're looking for is not here if you're looking for a real transformation. Because you can transform yourself, but it takes an environment to help you sustain that in the right way. That's why we see a richness of these things in Tibetan culture, traditional Tibetan culture, traditional Hindu, Indian culture, the yogic practices, traditional African spirituality, traditional South American cultures. That's why we see that richness, because the whole society, culture, environment was not based on survival. It was based on the evolution of the society itself in harmony with nature. Now, I'm done with that rant, and that is a transition to what I'm saying about Terrance Howard being a catalyst for this conversation to move it along to the next level. And what that is about is the things that we think we know, they are there to service capitalism. They're there to service making money, and that's fine for that purpose unto itself. Meaning that purpose exists. What's going to help that purpose move along? But if you got a different purpose, like what I was just talking about, then the science we got is not sufficient. It's not complete enough for that. And Terrence got 97 patents. Terrence got actual machines he's built. He's helped create virtual reality and augmented reality. His patent was used for virtual reality. Apple Vision Pro and MetaQuest does not exist without Terrance Howard, it turns out. He actually set the stage for those products. He could have been a trillionaire, but he just didn't make it in terms of getting the money from it. So the thing is that I want to start wrapping this up because I don't want this to be a long-winded conversation. But it comes down to ether and not ether. Current science is based on the absence of ether, and what we talk about is dark matter and dark energy. That's what Terrance Howard was talking about in many ways. Okay? Modern science, or what we call modern science, or the default mainstream science as of right now in 2024, because this could change, right? He might usher in a change in this viewpoint. But right now, science says there's dark energy and there's dark matter out in the universe, and that's what makes all the other physics equations work. Because without this dark matter and dark energy that they can't see, that they can't put in a lab, they can't prove it, it's just in the mathematics, right? The mathematics are not real. It's just something that you can formulate where you can say, okay, let's backtrack it to the real world if we can, right? And when they try to backtrack it to the real world, it doesn't work unless they put something in its place, put something in there. Terrence is saying that what they're calling dark matter and dark energy is what the ancients called ether. What the ancients called ether, prana, chi, or in Japan, ki, right? That force. Well, let's not say force, it's so aggressive, but that thing. And that gravity does not exist. It don't need gravity. Gravity is something that was made up because you didn't want to accept ether. So I'm on that side of it. So I'm gonna wrap this up by saying this is my transitional discussion to transition out of spirituality, health, holistic diet, holistic living discussions, because as I hinted in an earlier video, that I've said all I needed to say about that, and now I'm going to transition back into the discussions about science, technology, engineering, and math, which is what this channel was originally based on. So for those that have enjoyed these discussions on diets, healing, holistic living, I want to thank you for going this journey with me. And I do apologize for the slowdown in that type of discussion and content, but I'm originally interested in creating things. That is my passion, to build things, to bring things into manifestation. That's my spiritual identity, to manifest. Maybe not manifest dollars, okay? But to manifest the things that I'm interested in. I'm interested in certain things, and you're going to see what those things are in the videos to come. I have found my passion again. I found what I am about, which is to take these nebulous ideas that are in my mind, and I used to do this in industry. So I'm back to that. It's the return of the Jedi, the return of the programmer, the return of the master creator. That's who I am. And to look at this thing from a different lens that is more primordial. You don't need data structures and algorithms. You don't need those. I read the books on it. I understand what's being said. I've used ChatGPT to talk about this. And I found the whole thing is inadequate for certain types of innovations that you would want to pursue. Artificial intelligence is exactly that. It's artificial. I would much prefer RI, real intelligence. So, I've used AI for about a year. I've given it a good shot. I spent hours with this AI. I would start with AI at 5 p.m. and I would be finished with it by 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. That's how engrossed I got with it. It's good at generating AI art, thumbnails, and all that kind of stuff. Actually, it's not really great at that. It's just that, see, I can create all that stuff myself. It just might take me a week. It might take me a month. It can do it in a minute. That's great. That's fine. Beautiful. But if it doesn't understand your prompt the way you want it to, then instead of it generating one image for you, you're sitting there trying to refine your prompt and you end up with like 20 or 40 images by the time you're done, and 4 hours in, you say, oh, okay, I generated 20 different thumbnail arts. Let me just go ahead and put those in my video. It was never intended. It's great, it's creative, it's organic. But the thing is that the real problem with AI is that it's based off of the internet. And this is my opinion, but the internet is 90% inaccurate. It's a good starting point. If you do a Google search, if you do a pre-2023 Google search before Gemini, you will find what you're looking for, and it's a good starting point, but it most of the time it's not the final point. So I thought that AI would be able to power a new level of software development, but what AI has actually shown me is that I'm smarter than artificial intelligence. I write better code than artificial intelligence. So I'm not going to use it for code. I'm not going to use it for intellectual things. I'm not going to use it for anything that involves text, that includes blog posts. Because the thing about AI is this: it is actually the actual representation of the strict, by the book mastery of English grammar, Western mathematics and science, and so on and so forth. The things you go to college for to try to be really good at, where you have great grammar, great math skills, and all of this, AI is the absolute epitome of that. But you know what's wrong with that? Is that if you generate text information off of AI, it's too perfect. It doesn't have that human flavor to it. And that's when it loses its value. It is, it's just stale. It's lifeless. It's lifeless. Okay, so, and the only reason AI generated art has a chance, and I appreciate it, is because I know I put some effort into that in terms of my prompts, setting up the scene for the language model in terms of like an art director, right? Because I actually I went to art school. I studied all that, so I know how to use that language with the language models. But, if you actually start painting something by hand, or even if you use Photoshop or Illustrator or GIMP or Inkscape, and you just craft that by hand, and you can put the time into it, it's still going to be better. Yeah, Hollywood cinematic effect level AI generated art is great and everything like that. But once again, you put a real 20 or 30 or 40 year experienced artist to the task, they still are going to produce something far better. So, real intelligence, RI, generated books, real human generated books, real human generated blog posts, real human generated software code, real human generated music, and etc. That's better stuff. Okay? And if you want to disagree with me on AI generated music, just talk about the difference between 440 hertz and 432 hertz. Here, I dropped the mic on that. Hey, if you just look at 440 hertz versus 432 hertz, and 440 hertz versus 528 hertz, AI doesn't have a chance with that. If you talk about the natural harmonies of sound that's in nature, AI doesn't have a chance with that. It's not going to enrich the soul. It's not going to elevate you and put you to that right level where you're ready to conquer mountains and really push forward to do the impossible. AI can't motivate a human being like that. Only real rich human art can do that. So we got this far with the innovation, with the advancement of what's so-called AI, only to find out that it's not what we're looking for. Or as they say in Star Wars, these are not the drones you're looking for, right? And so, hey, I may not be the best of the best among human beings in building software or building art or any of that, but I'm better than AI. And I'm proud of what I can do and what I can produce, right? And I can produce some really great stuff. And so I'm going to pour my energy and my effort into that and leave that as a legacy on the internet. GitHub, GitLab, whatever, you know, whether somebody buys my software or I make a business out of it or whatever, it's irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that it's going to exist somewhere to the extent that we have free hosting platforms, you know, until somebody buys it out and cancels it out and charges money for it, right? You know, but until then, I'm going to have creations that will live on and be a contribution to the future of humanity, life, existence, and consciousness. So that's why I'm so profoundly optimistic about where we're going next, is that AI is a catalyst to actually show us that we can actually rely on ourselves and not get so hung up on having a machine as a crutch. Because if you go too far with the machines and you say we're going to put them on autopilot, it just doesn't go far enough, and it just isn't the real deal. So that's all I got to say on this. My next video, I'm going to talk about some software code that I wrote recently that I'm really proud of. It's a real challenge that I had. It was kind of one that came up unexpectedly, but I passed the test. GPT did not, but that's only just a side note. But I'm really stoked to talk about that, and I hope you stay tuned for that. Until then, I'll see you later.